here on France 24. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're having second thoughts about Qatar's 2022 bid for the World Cup. They're talking about moving it from summer to winter, perhaps at a FIFA Executive Committee meeting that's taking place in Switzerland this Thursday and Friday. With us to talk about it from the Gulf Emirate of Abu Dhabi, Omar al-RAISI, a columnist for the UAE Daily, The National, part of the local organizing committee for the FIFA Under-17 World Cup, which kicks off 2 weeks from today. Omar, by the way, the conditions there with obviously we're in October right now. How are things preparing for that Under-17 World Cup?
It's going great. It was a great decision by the FIFA and the local organizing committee to hold the World Cup in November. It is November, December is the best time when it comes to weather.
All right, so a lesson to be learned. You're saying. Tim Noonan is with us from Brussels. He's with the International Trade Union Confederation. Here with us, Christian Chesnot, co-author of Qatar Secrets from the Vault, published in French so far.
Yes.
Perhaps soon to be translated. Also with us is Cintia CARDOSO DELAUTRE from the Brazilian service of sister station Radio France International, and Joachim Barbier, journalist for SoFoot. Here in France, and Joachim knows all about Qatar's love affair with sports. Paris Saint-Germain fans delighted with their new owners, the arrival of big-name stars, their first league trophy in years. Other Emirates, by the way, they've done the same. Abu Dhabi owns Manchester City. Bahrain hosts Formula One. Today, though, we're talking about the world's biggest sporting tournament. The Guardian wonders if with the World Cup, Qatar has bitten off more than it can chew. With the taking the proposition to a whole new level, it's been an exercise that has brought the eyes of the world upon a tiny Gulf state. It was the point made in part one of our discussion by Joachim that opens you up to scrutiny. Brazil, you could say it's the same thing, that suddenly you've got all this attention.
Yeah, exactly. All the attention, and it's not new since we got the tournament. We have all the attention and we have all the more scrutiny since the protests last summer. And you see all the attention from the media and also from the population. And so far, everybody was pretty much excited about having a World Cup in Brazil. It's a pride. It's also a reason of joy for most of Brazilian fans. But they've started to realize that the benefits from the World Cup might be not as big as they supposed. And of course, now the population also is trying to look very close to everything, all the promise of the World Cup.
When Brazil got the news that it was going to host the tournament, it seemed like a given that this was just going to, it was at a time when Brazil was growing, this was going to increase your good reputation worldwide. Now, after those protests, how's Brazil's reputation on the world scene?
People realized that all the promises would not be fulfilled. I mean, the promise that Brazil, of course, hosting a World Cup would be a great event, of course, and good for the image of Brazil, but also promised that it would improve infrastructure, public transport, and so on. And so far, we haven't seen that much. So now it's a bittersweet feeling when you have almost 1 year ahead of Brazil. So they are still a bit excited, but they point out all the problems, especially now that the Brazilian economy is kind of in a slowdown.
Of course, Joachim, it's a different proposition when it comes to Qatar because money's not really the issue, it seems. We saw with hiring people like Zinedine Zidane to be your ambassador.
Yeah, it's a bit different. At the same time, I think it's the total failure of Sepp Blatter logic, because now football, he wanted football to be such a big thing, like FIFA being even bigger than the United Nations, but because it's in the middle of the life of so many people, billions of people, not only football lovers in Brazil, but across the world, that football is not only sports or leisure activity. Organizing a World Cup is not only organizing a sports event, it's even bigger than that. So it has to be, in a way, stainless, it has to be pure, because from the FIFA point of view, you need to attract sponsorship, huge money that goes into football. At the same time, people don't want to see all this money going to stadium and not being used properly. So at the same time, it reveals good governance demand from the people. They don't want to see good football or a good game or good players. They want to see like football into today's society, which is the problem with FIFA, people from FIFA. Everybody's over 70, 75 years old. They've been there for decades and decades, but time has changed. Time has changed in Qatar, time has changed in Brazil, time has changed everywhere in the world. So the football today has to be the image and the reflection of today's world.
And we have I got to say, a lot of criticism coming through from viewers on Twitter. This comment: Qatar should not have been given the World Cup in the first place. And this other one: no dictatorship should be allowed to host the World Cup. FIFA is an accomplice. Tim Noonan, your thoughts?
Well, the World Cup has been awarded to Qatar. The world is in massive need of infrastructure investment. The fact that the World Cup is going outside the traditional frame, they're all potentially very, very positive things. The reality is that as it stands, the World Cup will go ahead in Qatar. We are calling on FIFA to reconsider the decision. If nothing is done, and we've made very concrete and practical proposals about what needs to be fixed, and they're not difficult things to do, and the money is there, if those steps aren't taken, then FIFA should vote again. In the meantime, we've made an offer to FIFA this week to go with a joint inspection team, experts in construction safety, in living conditions from around the trade union movement, people whose job it is to save workers' lives every day. We're waiting for an answer from FIFA on that question. But we would say to Mr. Blatter, to Mr. Valk, and to the executive committee of FIFA, come with us into the labour camps. Come with us onto the building sites. Have a look at the reality and then join the campaign to fix things up.
Who has a greater burden of responsibility at this point, Qatar or football's world governing body, FIFA?
The FIFA and Qatar, but I think the World Cup will be in 10 years. So there is also some time to fix the social regulation, to fix the problem. But if we come back to the beginning, for Qatar, it's sport is industry and it's part of the soft power. This is why it's lots of money, lots of business, and I think the FIFA view through the eyes of Sepp Blatter, he wants something global, something universal, and Qatar at this moment is the country that can achieve this goal. So, but as I said, the Qatari, they are under a huge pressure. It will continue. Maybe Amnesty International, maybe there will be lots of reports on it. So, at the end of the day, they will have to change. If they don't change, it will be a disaster for them because they don't like the bad publicity, the bad.
A disaster for Qatar, or a disaster for FIFA?
But for the two, the both, you know, because the World Cup would be a tiny World Cup. Doha is a small town. There will be 12 stadium in a very small area. There will be few supporters because I think it will be expensive to come. For the fan, there will be special zone to drink beer and alcohols. So it will be a special World Cup. I don't know, but we'll see. But I think Qatar has to change.
All right, Qatar has to change. Will it change? Omar Al-Raisi, what's the Qatar that you'll see in 2020? Give us 2022 rather. Give us a prediction on that.
I think they will do good if they agree, and I think this is.
But do you imagine? Excuse me, Omar. Do you imagine, for instance, Dutch fans or English fans walking down the main strip there in Doha by the Corniche there?
I do. If you go down now to Qatar, you see people from all over the world. They live there, they work there, from Britain, from France, from Germany, from Netherlands, from all over the world. They have people from everywhere who live and work there.
But they're not football fans on tour.
They're not football fans on tours. That's right. But I think there's a lot of time. There is about 9 to 10 years until 2022, and they have time to fix everything from the leagues, from FIFA, from UEFA, from TV rights, from all the stakeholders, and especially and most importantly, the immigrant workers' rights. And they have time to fix everything, which is the highest.
But every day's delay costs another worker's life.
Absolutely.
Every day's delay costs another worker's life. And it's been 600 days since we first raised this. So I think you're very correct in the observation about the potential. But the longer this takes, the more people are going to die. And I would add that quite a number of expatriates are in Qatar because they're not allowed to leave. The Nepal embassy a couple of months ago reported that every week they receive 50 complaints from workers whose contract is finished, but whose employer doesn't bother to let them out of the country, so they're stuck. We have Zahir Belounis, the French football player, who's stuck in Qatar because he dared to take a court case against his club, Al Jaish, for non-payment of wages, and they've simply said, you can't leave. So he's stuck there.
Omar Al-Raisi?
I think these are issues and big ones, which has no excuses, and it shouldn't be happening that way. And the Qatari government has to act. And as he mentioned, every day someone else would die, which is unacceptable. Football is about love, it's about friendship, it's about getting everybody together, not about blood and building stadiums on people's lives. It shouldn't be a blood World Cup, it should be a football World Cup.
All right, and there's another issue that Joachim raised earlier, which maybe we'd like to address more fully now. Will the real Sepp Blatter please stand up? The boss of FIFA first had this to say last month.
No, it was not a mistake to avoid the World Cup because by the rotation of the World Cup, it was time to go also to the Arabic world. And here we are in the Arabic world. The country is not a very big one, but it's a very important one. So the decision was absolutely in the context of the politics of FIFA, and especially the politics of this president.
But 9 days later, the same Josef Sepp Blatter granted an interview to German newsweekly Dheepthi, criticizing, as he put it, it was directly influenced by political decisions. European governments recommended to their representatives to vote for Qatar because they had important economic interests in the country. Joachim, it's the fault of the Europeans.
I don't see which country has got some economical interest with Qatar, not France. No. No, but Sepp Blatter is a funny bloke. You know, he's a clown.
Was that a direct dig at the French? Because we know there have been close ties between...
One of it's a country was doing business with Qatar, the number one partner, isn't it?
UK, German, United States. There is a big company because we will build some 9 stadiums, but we'll build the airport, the roads, the metro, the tramway, many things. So it's a huge business for the Europe. But at the same time,
okay, but how do you explain within 9 days the disparity in those statements? One
because he's under pressure. He's under pressure, but he never talks about his own agenda, his own diplomacy. Why he's been rewarded to Qatar? Because Qatar has been funding all the youth competition organized by FIFA for decades and decades, and one day he has to reward them with the biggest competition. But yeah, of course, there's a huge economic interest because everything has to be built there, not only stadium but infrastructure, and it's because actually FIFA behave a bit like a former colonial power when they organize a World Cup. They come to a country. They ask them, you have to build everything, stadiums, roads, public transport. They take all the money, they don't pay taxes, and they go back to Zurich, put the money into Swiss bank, thank you, bye-bye.
They've also pushed a law through the Russian parliament that would exclude migrant workers in Russia from important labour law protections in the protection of the World Cup in Russia.
The Sochi Olympics.
No, the World Cup, in Russia. A 5-year exclusion for migrant workers from a whole range of protection of working hours, overtime, payment guarantees. Sport can no longer be conducted on this basis. I'm a sports lover, and before I got old, I used to play a lot of sport, and it grieves me and it grieves all of us very deeply that we're in this situation now where the human story remains untold, where it's always somebody else's fault, but nobody actually moves to deal with the fundamental issues.
Cintia, CARDOSO, you mentioned in part one, there's the issue of those migrant labor from another part of Brazil who were brought in to build an expansion. I believe it was to Sao Paulo Airport.
Exactly.
Has it raised the issue as well there of the working conditions for people building these giant infrastructure?
Yeah, it was raised the issue, but on the contrary, the difference that in Brazil it was the Minister of Labor that revealed the situation of the workers. So at least it came from the government who realized that the really poor, very poor labor conditions. But it's about the same. I mean, they are Brazilian migrants, but Brazil is so huge that it's almost coming from another country because they come from the very poorest areas of Brazil, such as the Amazon.
All right, and when you look at Brazil, you've got you've hit a bonanza because it's not only the World Cup in 2014, it's also the Olympics in 2016. Now, when you weigh the pluses and minuses of major sporting events, well, everyone can have their own example to make their point. The 1992 Barcelona Olympics sealed Spain's renaissance as a major European power. But it took Montreal decades to pay back the cost of the 1976 Games. On that score, when you look at the protests that marred the Confederations Cup recently in Brazil, which is the warm-up tournament for the World Cup, what's your prediction, Cintia? Is the World Cup in Brazil worth it?
Well, it's very difficult to predict. I mean, if I could predict, I would be a millionaire by now. But, well, the problem is that, the problem number one is the infrastructure. So they promised several things amidst also a train from São Paulo to Rio. They promised new airports. They promised new subways. And so far, we haven't seen perhaps not even 50% of the promise they have accomplished. So I think it's going to be very difficult to pay off. I don't know if it's going to be so dramatic to make decades to pay off, but I don't think it's going to be this renaissance like Barcelona. It's not going to be such a profitable as they imagined in the beginning.
Joachim, if I remember correctly, there was a World Cup here in France. It went rather well sportingly for the hosts. When you look back at that, when you look at what obviously there was the victory for the French team, but when you look at the pluses and minuses, hosting these big sporting events seems like it's worth it when you look, if you're speaking to a French person, right?
Yeah, but we actually never talk or never heard about how much public money it costs to the country. It's never been an issue, and it looks like it was a long time ago. It was only 1998, 15 years ago, and that kind of issue were not discussed anywhere in a public space. But for France, it was the main failure was about the stadium that was built and they were already obsolete 10 years ago, and has to be built again for the Euro, which is going to be organized in 3 years' time. But at that time, it wasn't an issue. And but I think that because now sporting events like that are such a big thing, they will be given only to emerging countries that want to exist on the global stage, especially because of the economic recession in Europe and Western world. We can't actually afford it. So I think that kind of issue, what we've seen with Qatar, because it's not acceptable for anyone that some people are dying while they're building stadiums. So it's going to be more and more, I wouldn't say complicated, but discussable, the condition in which they are organized.
But World Cup or not, it's a real problem. The migrants' problem in the Qatar. It's so the World Cup, it's focusing on this problem. But for Qatar, it's not a problem of money because they will pay everything. And even they said that the stadium, some of part of the stadium will be sent back to some emerging country in Africa or in Asia. So voila. So the stadium will be reused in other parts of the world.
All right, and people seem to, when you look back at previous events that have taken place, there was a bribery scandal, for instance, for the Winter Games in Salt Lake City. Those games took place. Everyone was happy that they took place in the end. Is it all going to blow over this time?
I don't know. I remember that the day FIFA rewarded this World Cup, I crossed my finger and I said, I hope it won't be given to Russia and Qatar. It's what happened. It has to do with management. Who's at the executive committee of FIFA? Is there any woman? Is there anybody who's 40, 35 years old?
But as you were saying, FIFA is always, it's a closed circuit of old men.
Yeah.
Are they ever going to be called into question, is my...
Yeah, but I think till you don't change the rule, there would be the system...
They're untouchable.
Yeah, and the system is providing this kind of and giving, yeah.
And they are so strong, you know, the FIFA is more powerful than the state sometimes. So for them, like, as you say, it's more powerful than United Nations sometimes. They can say to a country, if you don't respect this, if you, for instance, if there is political in your federation, you are out of the game. So it's very powerful for them. So they are playing on this, and they are real actor on the world scene.
This power was
I think there's
by
another
population last a few months, because they say that they want not only FIFA standard stadiums, they want education standards also. The role of FIFA in Brazil is also very criticized, exactly because, as I said, it's a colonialist.
All right, a very brief last word from Tim Noonan, because we're out of time.
The companies that are building the facilities, the sponsors of the World Cup, the sports brands who've been riding on a very comfortable gravy train now for many years have a responsibility too. They are part of the problem. They need to become part of the solution.
Tim Noonan, I want to thank you. I want to thank Omar Al-Raisi for joining us from Abu Dhabi, and here in the studio, Christian Chenot, Joachim Barbier, and Cintia CARDOSO DELAUTRE. Before we say goodbye, though, let's say hello to Olivia Salazar-Winspear. It's our Media Watch segment. We've been mentioning what's been top of the front page in The Guardian this Thursday. There's another newspaper in England which I believe has been making headlines.
Yes, it's of course the Daily Mail. Now, this is a story that's been running in the UK press for the best part of this week. This is the controversy over the Daily Mail's claims that Ed Miliband's father, Ralph Miliband, hated the UK, hated Britain. Just to contextualise, they published a very controversial article at the weekend that was based on diary entries, correspondence, writing from Ralph Miliband, in which they detected an anti-British sentiment. They said
his dad was a Marxist.
His dad was a Marxist, and they said this was anti-British. Now, many people criticised this article for its tone. They said it was disrespectful. The man himself has passed away many years ago and can't defend himself. So they were asked to apologise. Ed Miliband asked them to apologise, and he asked for a right of reply, which he was allowed. He was allowed to respond in the Daily Mail to these allegations, and he says, "My father loved Britain, in fact." The Daily Mail stood very firm, and next to this op-ed, they published another article saying, no, we stand by this initial article and we won't apologise. Now that, of course, sparked a stream of controversy. A lot of journalists then digging into the Mail's very murky past, their association with British fascists, Lord Rothermere, the founder of the paper, his friendship with Adolf Hitler. There were editorials written, for example, in The Guardian, where they say the real problem here is that the Mail have issues with Ed Miliband because he supports Lord Leveson's proposals to put stricter regulations on the press in the UK.
I was going to say, we've seen all the controversy surrounding Rupert Murdoch's News of the World, which was forced to change its name to The Sun on Sunday.
Yeah.
But the Daily Mail is a different kettle of fish.
The Daily Mail, sadly, or not sadly, depending on where you stand on the UK media, is the most read paper in the country, and it has a circulation of 4.5 million. As the New Yorker pointed out when they profiled the paper last year, they say this is the newspaper that rules Britain. It's the most powerful newspaper in the country. Now, this whole controversy this week, of course, was an opportunity for the left to really stick the knife in the Daily Mail. There is a huge part of the UK media who are against what the Mail do, what they stand for, and they took every opportunity to say that. Now, the BBC did a whole Newsnight special on this issue in which the Mail was invited to come and defend their position. Paul Dacre, the editor of the paper, was expected. He wasn't there. Alistair Campbell was another guest who was very angry that Paul Dacre wasn't there. So let's listen to what he has to say about the Mail.
Paul Dacre hasn't got the guts himself to come on this programme and defend something which I know John Staple believes is not defensible. And what you've got to understand about the Daily Mail, it is the worst of British values posing as the best. And when Ed Miliband went out today, he went out and demanded a right of reply and spoke as he did today. He did that, and I'm glad that David Cameron and Nick Clegg have supported him in what he did. He did it because he actually believes in genuine political debate and genuine freedom of speech.
So as you can see, that's a real criticism of the Mail. People are asking questions about the paper's credibility now, but it's only boosted, the whole affair has only boosted Ed Miliband's popularity, actually, this week.
But boost his popularity, and it'll be probably one of the questions we put to our panel in the World This Week on Friday. Question is everyone playing to their own gallery? Olivia Salazar-Winspear, I want to thank you. I want to thank our panel, and we want to thank you, of course, for being with us here for the France 24 debate.